We are back for another review of Ned Blackhawk's A Rediscovery of America. Today I'm going to be diving into chapters 7 and 8, which focus on race, obviously, colonialism, obviously, and indigenous resistance in early U.S. history. So let's get into it. Okay, chapter 7, settler colonialism. A lot of this chapter focused heavily on Thomas Jefferson. He had severe racist ideologies. He was really big into eugenics, and this shaped a lot of the policies put on Native Americans and enslaved people through U.S. policies. Jefferson was really afraid of the Haitian Revolution that had occurred, and he was really worried that it was going to happen in America. And that fear really drove him to fuel some policies that reinforced white supremacy and in turn linked land ownership to racial identity. He was setting the tone to create whiteness as the category of privilege. And everyone else was following suit because it benefited them, the colonizers. Also talks about how land dispossession wasn't just about territory. It was more than that. It was about power. Jefferson pushed Native displacement to create a farming middle class, reinforcing racial distinctions not only in society but in law as well. Laws like the Militia Act of 1792 is a great example of this, and it further solidified whiteness equaling privilege. Even though there was Native sovereignty that was recognized through treaties, Jefferson did just about everything he could do to sidestep that and get around it, find a loophole. The Louisiana Purchase is an excellent example of that. He made sure that indigenous people had no legal say or right whatsoever, which really set the stage for Andrew Jackson's violent removal policies. The Supreme Court, under Chief Justice John Marshall, made quite ambiguous rulings that failed to protect Native sovereignty. And this legal inconsistency further paved the way for land seizures and indigenous displacement. It was really, saying this sounds so inconsiderate because of how awful it was, but yet again, this was a really unfortunate time to be Native in America. They really only had one goal in mind, as we'll continue to see. So now we're going to shift to Chapter 8, Foreign Policy Formations. Here in this chapter, Blackhawk explores the indigenous struggles in the Pacific Northwest in California. Kind of exciting only because we're here in Oregon, so to hear and learn some of the real history that happened here in Oregon and in this area is pretty fascinating. The Spanish mission system, those damn conquistadors, they just wrecked Native communities through forced labor, environmental destruction, and systemic violence, especially against indigenous women. Native women are still being pursued and oppressed today. They are actually the highest risk. They are at the highest risk of sexual abuse, violence, and even death than any other woman in America, still to this day. And it just goes to show how, even in present times, we're still not protecting Native people, even though we've made peace and we're doing the right thing. It's still something that is not getting the attention that it deserves, because it is a serious issue. If you're curious about it, I encourage you to look up the hashtag MMIW, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. It is a a movement similar to Me Too, but it focuses solely on the history and the never-ending abuse that Indigenous women face in this country. Back to the chapter. One of the key figures in this chapter was Twiparita. She was a Tongva medicine woman. She actually led a revolt against the San Gabriel mission. Unfortunately, the revolt was unsuccessful, but her resistance highlights the strength of Indigenous women in fighting colonial oppression. She was a badass, to put it quite frankly. She did what needed to be done, and while it wasn't successful, she was definitely a symbol and very highly admired back then by her courage and by doing what needed to be done. She just did the damn thing. So then we fast forward to 1848. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo transferred Spanish territories to the U.S. And of course, no surprise, the violence against Native people continues. We just swapped oppressors. The U.S. government, much like the Spanish, saw Indigenous labor as essential, crucial, and necessary to their own economic expansion. At this point, it was about being white, but it was about achieving the goals that they wanted to achieve, which was westward expansion, the greatness of America, and they were willing to do whatever needed to be done to make it happen. Even if they were the bad guys, they still played themselves as the heroes of the day, all in the name of America, in God. Same shtick, different day, really. In Chapter 8, lastly, Blackhawk also tied conflicts to U.S. foreign policy, specifically the Monroe Doctrine. He argued that the U.S. used Native resistance in the Pacific Northwest to justify his territorial ambitions, its territorial ambitions while opposing European influence in the Americas. Meanwhile, at the same time, Latin American countries gained independence, which only further sparked fear in U.S. leaders, who, again, no surprise, saw multiracial republics as a threat to their own racial hierarchy. If you want to look further into that and maybe look at it from a psychological standpoint, I encourage you to look up white fragility and what that means, because that definitely applies here. So big takeaways from chapters 7 and 8 really highlighted the fact that expansion wasn't just about land. It was about building a racial order that benefited the colonizers, the white Americans, at the expense of Indigenous and Black communities. And they were happy to do it. Blackhawk in this chapter really challenged the traditional narrative, revealing how deeply racist and how deeply racism was embedded in both domestic and foreign policies. So yeah, I'm interested if you have any comments to say about this chapter, any questions. Anyways, thanks for watching. Tune in next time. Bye.